Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. The City University of New York was founded in 1961 when the New York State Legislature united 7 individual colleges into an integrated system. Today, CUNY is the nation's largest urban public university. It has 26 campuses and postgraduate institutions, including the CUNY Graduate Center and schools of law, journalism, and public health. My guest today is Félix V. Matos Rodríguez, CUNY's 8th Chancellor and the first Latino to head the university. He sits at the helm of a university system that has provided higher education and opportunity to generations. Today, CUNY serves over 275,000 students from diverse ethnic, economic, and linguistic backgrounds. A native of Puerto Rico and graduate of Yale University and Columbia University, Dr. Matos Rodríguez has extensive publications in the fields of women's, Puerto Rican, Caribbean, and Latino studies and migration. He serves on numerous prestigious boards and is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He joins me today to discuss the qualities of higher education that are uniquely CUNY. Stay with us for a conversation with Chancellor Félix Matos Rodríguez about shaping the future of a great institution. Now on EdCast. My guest today is Félix V. Matos Rodríguez, Chancellor of the City University of New York since May 2019. The Chancellor's career has deep roots in both the academic and public sectors. Chancellor Matos Rodríguez has served as president of both Queens College and Ostos Community College. He is a respected scholar, teacher, administrator, and former Cabinet Secretary of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Today he joins me to discuss what lies ahead for CUNY and its students. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chancellor
Happy
Matos.
to be here again, Linda, so thank you for the invite.
Always a pleasure to have you here. You have a unique perspective, I believe, as being one of the few people who serves as a chancellor who has been both a president of a community college and a senior college. What have you learned from that experience, and what do you think we should know about each other?
Well, I think it's a great question. Again, thanks for the invitation, because I think for many years, if you look at most of the staffing at the central office and has been individuals that have experience with the senior colleges for the 4-year schools. And about half of our system is the community colleges, right? And so I think it's important to think of us, and actually one of the gifts of CUNY is that integration. In many other places, the two systems are separate, and if we think at times that we don't get all things perfect, it's even tougher when you have two separate systems. So we have the blessing that we were created in an integrated way. Right. So I hope that, what I learned and some of the other individuals who are part of the team also now, that we can be more thoughtful when we think about things that impact both the 4-year schools and the 2-year schools, and make that promise of the largest amount of integration that is desirable possible. And I think there's a lot of things that can be done on the transfer area, which you're very familiar with, from your students from Ostos. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that the perspective in the central office from the community college perspective has been somewhat missing, and I hope that not just myself, but then some of the individuals that you appoint and you bring as part of the team are able to balance that in a way that benefits the entire system.
Was there anything that surprised you about being the president of both of them? Like when you went to Queens, that was very different from Hostos?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that people assume is that because you're part of the CUNY system, there's a lot of things that are very similar. Right. And each campus has a very, very unique identity, and you need to be able to respect that. And that is an important reflection even when you take it at scale. Now that that I'm overseeing 25 campuses, right? That even though we're a system and there's a lot of things that where certain kind of uniformity and elements of systemness are appropriate, that you also need to protect and nurture that individual character that each one of our campuses has, and the role they play, particularly in the communities that they serve in their immediate surroundings.
This is a tough job. Now we know that CUNY lately has been in the news because it has been ranked one of the best value colleges, I believe, by Money Magazine, by the Wall Street Journal, by U.S. News and World Reports. What is our ranking, and what do you think? Why do you think we're doing so well?
Well, I think obviously the rankings indicate the new chancellor, right? That all happened because I started the job in May, right? So I want to take full credit for all those phenomenal rankings. But
I think you should take full credit.
Thank you. No, but seriously, I mean, I think they validate our history, which goes back to the Free Academy, right? Of that opportunity and access to individuals that have the talent, the promise, the grit to want an education and to fulfill their dreams, and to do it in a way that is affordable, but do it with academic excellence. One of the things that I emphasize to all the folks, I said, all those metrics, which are mostly tied to either social mobility or return on investment, is really the core of many of those rankings. If the component of academic excellence was not there, we wouldn't do as well in the rankings. So it's not just about being affordable, right? It is also the education that we're providing, the support services that we're providing are really comprehensive and excellent and good, and they're, creating a graduate that goes in and is impressive, like many of our students.
What do we know, just to review for people who are watching, what do we know about CUNY as an engine of mobility?
Well, I mean, we've been saying that for years, and as a faculty member, you've seen it in your in your students. The study by Rack Shetty, the economist, who was at Stanford, now at Harvard, validated that with data that shows that CUNY is the #1 school in the United States as a system, right, and the colleges individually, in moving the individuals who are in the bottom sort of quartile of socioeconomic earnings into the higher one, right? So it was a way of quantifying, if you wish, that American dream story of being able to come in poor or working class, and the CUNY education being the one factor that sort of moves you into the middle class or even to above. So nobody in the U.S. does a better job than the City University of New York. And I think it's something that we need to be incredibly proud of and continue to work to make sure that we keep it.
Now, in terms of our students' mobility, what do you think, what are some of the factors that you think we've been doing at the university that have really helped move our students forward?
Well, I think there's a combination of keeping sort of tuition relatively affordable, and at the end of the day, even with some tuition increases, maybe just about 11% of our students in the system pay tuition.
That's an interesting fact.
So most people assume, not just no debt, but they, only 11% pay. For the other 89 between TAP and Pell, they're mostly covered, right? We also know our students have other needs that are not covered by that, and we need to be cognizant of that. And I think that that's part of the work that lays ahead in terms of social mobility, looking at food insecurity, looking at some of the other things which you also know, from our also students that affect their academic impact. I think the fact that we have really good faculty, providing, and I know that you're going to agree on that.
Absolutely.
Providing quality, programs, and also giving our students a really solid sort of general education grounded in the liberal arts, that shows in these indicators, meaning that they're able to go out there, pursue graduate degrees, professional degrees. If they're not going to do that, go into a career and excel. So I think it's that combination of really solid programming and academic sort of pedagogy and working with the students, and the fact that we've kept our tuition and fees extremely affordable.
I think I read somewhere that if you were an out-of-state student and you went to CUNY, you would still pay a lower tuition than you might if you went to your home.
Some of my friends in our nearby states do not like me to say that.
Oh, well, let's say it.
But clearly, the tuition at Rutgers, I think, is about 14 or 16,000, which is about where our out-of-state tuition is. So if you are a resident of New Jersey coming to a school in CUNY, as an out-of-state is almost as much as you would pay for, let's say, Rutgers, Newark.
Well, we won't publicize that, but we'll just say it here.
Now, but it provides context about how,
yes.
even at times when when we might feel that resources are constrained, that affordability has been a keystone of our system.
I know that our diversity is also a really key strength. Our students represent so many different backgrounds. And however, I recently read that we also were cited for our diversity in our managerial component. Tell us.
Well, I mean, I think it's something that we don't talk about much.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about diversity, we look at the students or we look at the faculty, right? And clearly we have work to do on the faculty side to sort of, you know, if you determine that an imperfect but appropriate benchmark is that the faculty and staff sort of mirror the population that we serve, we still have some work to do, but that ranking from the Chronicle of Higher Education shows that compared to the nation, we are really way, way ahead in having gender, race, and ethnicity sort of diversity in our senior management ranks. I think there's still work to be done. You know, one of the key things in sort of putting together the team around me in the central office that I've looked at is diversity, right? Excellence and diversity. And I'm hoping that the presidents in the campuses also follow through.
It was an interesting component. I must say I was not aware of that. Now, what do you consider some of the signature programs that CUNY is offering that contribute to its success for students?
Well, I mean, I think that let me flip a question a little bit and talk about some of the things where I would like us to do better.
Okay.
If you allow me that.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I think there's plenty that we knew that is good and solid, and there's you know things like ASAP that other states are trying to replicate, and each campus has sometimes programs that are not system-wide, but they're very effective in their own. In Hostels, we have the student success coaches, but I think that there's some areas where more work needs to be done, and I think one is the whole career engagement area. Right? If about half of our students are the first one in their family to go to college, right, we need to be that entity that provides the networks, the social capital, that in many cases parents of wealthier means provide for their kids. Right? Our students don't have that, right? Not because the parents don't love them, it's just that they don't have access to those networks. We need to be that space where the student is able to get their first and second paid internship so that they either get a sense of what they want to do, or equally important, a sense of what they don't want to do, and they start building networks that then allow them to either think about a professional degree or an advanced degree, or if they're going to go straight into the workforce, that they have in their resume an experience and maybe even already a job offer. We know that the students that get a paid internship, if they go to work immediately after graduation, they get employment faster and they earn more. And you also know that that first salary follows you for life. Right? So I want us to be much more effective in working with our students through our Career Services Center, in giving them a sense of what those possibilities are out there, and particularly on the paid internships. I think is a huge thing, and it's also money in their pocket that addresses food insecurity and some other things too.
You really raise that very interesting point that in the more selective colleges, that idea of making networking and making connections is really big part of those systems and really help students. So where are we looking for internships?
Well, I mean, I think that they need to be thought about broadly. For example, and I give you two examples that are CUNY-wide, which is answering your original question, which I think are incredibly valuable. The Service Corps, right? Born out of responding to Hurricane Sandy, our students participate in a paid internship working with community groups. And it's part of a whole exercise in which they have to write essays, reflect on the experience. So there's an academic component in addition to what they do. They get paid a stipend, right? So here are students sort of out there working with community-based organizations, doing great work, and getting experience and getting paid. We just began with funding from the city, Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Rockefeller Foundations, the CUNY Culture Course, which is a version of that, working with cultural institutions. So we have about 400 students out there now who are getting a stipend, who are getting experience, who are reflecting on the experience, and they are working at the Lincoln Center, at all kinds of cultural institutions in the city. Great experience for them, and it's also a way to begin to make all those cultural spaces in the city, which sometimes, in terms of their staffing and leadership, do not reflect the individuals that you want to attend the museums or the spaces. So those are examples, right? So I don't want people to think that when we talk about internships, it's just science or STEM. I mean, this has to be broad so the students of all opportunities get to be able to do that kind of work, either validate their interest or expose themselves to something new.
So you're segueing right into something I wanted to ask you about. That's wonderful. I think that's such good news. In terms of STEM, obviously we hear so much about STEM, and yet of course there are employers who say that a lot of STEM students really don't graduate with some of the skills that they really need, those more soft, liberal, artsy kind of skills, and now they call it STEAM. So what's your take on the value of the liberal arts? To be honest, we're living in a world that is devaluing the liberal arts, and
but
because of the emphasis on STEM careers and.
But in a funny way, not really, right? Because, like you said, all the employers would say, well, we want people who can be critical thinkers, or we want people that have good, who can write and have good communication skills. Well, that doesn't happen so much in a computer science class or in a finance class, right? That happens in, and so I think that we need to continue to show that value. It's something that I talk to parents when, in open houses, when the students come, that those are key tools that are going to help them. And I think they're going to be extra valuable in this world that the students that are graduating now are going to go into, in which they're going to have to reinvent themselves every 5-10 years. If you don't have first that critical capacity to know, right, that retooling is something you need to do because change is coming, right? And then you don't have the skill set to do that, you're not going to be as successful in the economy of the future. So I think that those skills are extremely valuable. Even when we talk to employers in other areas, they come back to that too. So we need to find a way in which our curriculum integrates that, values that, and we need to tell stories to the students so they and their families can understand that.
Well, I think these cultural internships, just to go back to that a minute, we live in a city that has all these cultural opportunities. You couldn't do that in many other places, but here you really can, and tapping into that is just wonderful, I have to say.
You're absolutely right, and then also think about the importance of the exposure to some of those courses in the liberal arts. I mean, you know it, I know it, the students that come and their families say, first generation college, you need to do something practical, right? And that's usually defined in banking, business, all these things. And then the student comes and takes an anthropology course or takes a creative writing course, right? And those eyes open up, right, to a whole world of possibility. And then they either go that route or they combine it with what they're going to do. But that exposure is critical, and is critical for the students that we serve.
So you're saying that education really is broad, and that we're still looking at really giving students not just a sense of the money, but what is your passion, what is your interest, and CUNY really provides that. I think we do that so beautifully.
Absolutely, and also a critical and cultural anchor for them to be able to explore the world. Absolutely necessary.
My students love to visit museums that they haven't been to. When we take them to places, they just love it, and it's all there.
Okay. So last night, I was fortunate that I was with the students from the Macaulay Honor School, and for the past 8 years, the Brooklyn Museum closes at 6, and it's a night just for the students in the Macaulay Honors to begin their first art seminar, and they get to explore the museum by themselves. And even the Macaulay Honor students, about a third of those students have never been to a museum, right? So your point is dead on, and it was a joy. I was with them last night. First, to be in a non-crowded museum, right? Because I normally go
like that too.
when there's an opening or something, and then you don't have, but what a gift to see them interacting in a different way with all the different halls that they had. And kudos, again, in this case, to the faculty, and I know this is done across our campuses, in this case, the Macaulay faculty, for creating, and the Brooklyn Museum, thank you for closing that night and making these students first feel very special, right?
That's wonderful.
And make a connection that hopefully will be life-changing.
And these are intimidating institutions. I've noticed sometimes when my students enter the it's awesome. I mean, it's huge, it's beautiful, but it's intimidating. So I think it's really important that, especially for first-generation students, which I actually was that it's important to go and see these institutions because it really enriches their education. And it's wonderful that CUNY is doing all this with our students.
We're doing the campus. And the cultural course goes also then to create a space when you go to those places. If you tend to see, staff and leadership that looks more like you're going to feel a lot more at home. And that's part of the thought in the culture corps.
Now, we have been giving our students lots of different experiences, and I know this marks the anniversary of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico,
This
and I know
Friday.
that you have done some work there as well. I know that I believe last summer you went with some students, and you went, I think, in the winter time. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the impact of that was both on Puerto Rico and on you and the students?
So let me say two things. Thank you for the question. First, if my accent didn't give it up, born and raised in Puerto
It's your
Rico,
home.
very thankful to those CUNY students for going back to my island and doing incredible basic work in helping families refurbish their homes, fix roofs, build roofs, repair rooms. This last summer, so we sent about, I think, 600. Last summer we sent 200 this summer. The rainforest, which when you go to Puerto Rico normally as a tourist, everybody goes to. All the paths that lead to all the wonderful waterfalls and the things that you see in the commercials, they were all destroyed by the hurricane. Who cleaned that up? The CUNY students. I was with them this. I used to camp as a Boy Scout in the rainforest. So the trails to get that cleaned up by CUNY students. I visited families in several towns this summer and past summer still, right? So great service, which is part of the CUNY DNA, a great experience to our students who got to bond with those families. In many of those communities, they would feed the students, they were learning the language, they were exposed to culture, and last summer also there was a course component, so they would get a context of the history of Puerto Rico. I think an incredibly enriching opportunity for our students, incredibly important to Puerto Rico. In this sense, I thank the Governor Cuomo who invited us, say, you have the Service Corps, you have an instrument, let's put it to good use to go down and support the work in Puerto Rico. And one last story. When I was visiting in Puerto Rico, the historic moment of people in the streets requesting that the governor resign and the governor resigning, right? There was a cohort of students there. I told them, you're here for 2 weeks and you picked the 2 most historic weeks in the history of Puerto Rico to be here.
That's
to hear the
amazing.
students reflect on what they were learning, on what they were watching, priceless.
So they learned about history, learned about government politics, and at the same time, they really were doing something so valuable. And for you, I'm sure, I can hear you talking about it, it was a really amazing experience. I heard some of them change their majors.
As a result
What happened?
of that, I mean, again, it was a really, and I think particularly the cohort that went the summer right after, right, in which you still
All the
have, I mean, things
devastation.
are a little bit better now, still work to be done, but it was a real emotional thing, and the bonding with those families, I think it made them look at life and service in a very different way. And again, this was hard work. I mean, these students were getting up at 6, to go an hour, and go fix, roofs. And when I went last summer, I was mixing cement with my hands. I was up in the roof. My wife kept saying that it was a stunt double because she's never seen me do so much manual work. But our students got that. And then at the end of the day, they were able to connect with community and also learn from each other. And the group of students were as diverse as our students. So that bonding was also an educational experience for them.
Also demonstrates you can learn a lot outside the classroom too. A lot of things that we remember
Yes.
in our lives, the things that were that had the greatest impact, or things that maybe happened to us outside of the classroom. I always think about that when I'm teaching. That
Absolutely.
it's not just what happens in my class, but what do I do for them out of the class?
And one of the students, I remember this year, a student from Lehman, she said that she was always extremely shy, and that it was actually this experience of being forced to be 2-3 weeks with a group of strangers working that had really gotten her out of her shell and feeling confident. I mean, she was one of the first ones asking questions, so you could see the transformation, and that can translate it then into her academic performance,
Absolutely.
her self-confidence, all those things.
And we're actually running out of time, so I want to make sure that I ask you, what are your priorities as the chancellor, and what do you see as some of your short-term goals and your long-range goals?
So let me mention 2 short-term things and then a larger term. The larger term thing for me is that even though I've been blessed to be in the CUNY system since 2000 as a faculty member and administrator, I think it's important and humble to listen. There's a lot to be learned about our system, about all our campuses, and I want to be able to take some time to be able to listen so that we can get a shared agenda in terms of a strategic vision to move forward. So I want to spend some time doing that, which I know is mostly associated with somebody who will come from the outside, but I think that I need to be, again, humble and smart. But there's a couple of things that I think that there's consensus that we can work in. There's a whole area of career engagement I think in all our campuses, there's a lot of good organic things happening in career services that we can tap and continue. The employer community is looking more and more at our students. I think the elected officials know that for parents, what are my students going to do next is really valuable. So I think that provides an opportunity for us to really push the envelope in all that area of career engagement. Student success. We've had really good success with programs like ASAP, the Academic Momentum Campaign, encouraging students to take 15 credits if they can manage them, to sort of stay in time and graduate on time, all those things that, take their gateway courses on time, all those things that you know. But one thing we have not emphasized is what happens in the classroom. Teaching, pedagogy, right? Which I know comes dear to your heart. And we know that if we do a better job there, increased retention happens, students don't drop out. So I would love to do an investment working with our faculty on what happens in the classroom. So more investment in teaching, in pedagogy, that I know would not only be good as a professional development from our faculty, but it'd be really good for our students in their success.
See my own wheels. That's a really interesting idea, to sort of a faculty institute or a kind of faculty idea of research and pedagogy that go together rather than just best practices, but the research that goes along with the best practices. I think that
absolutely, and all those things are happening.
And we're doing so much research. That we were the ones at the beginning of, basic writing, and all the research comes from CUNY, and that's really. We
really have not found a way to sort of move that up system-wide. And I think you also know when you and I were trained in graduate school, we didn't get any teaching training.
No.
Right? Research and jump. Right? So I think in our graduate center too, which I know they've been doing this, so I think that we can have that mark of distinction that CUNY has excellence in their teaching, which I think people recognize now, but I want to take it to the next level in consultation with our faculty, and that would also create confidence in the students that we're graduating.
That is a very interesting idea. Just a last question then. They're telling me our time is up. What's the part of this job that you're liking the most? And maybe what you're not liking so much.
Well, I'm going to tell you, for the first time since 1994, I woke up in the fall and I was not on a campus. So part of, I'm visiting Lehman today. I was with my college students, the day before. So I've been trying to do some visits. I think it's important, but it's also a way in which I get energy and I get, I'm reminded of what needs to happen. So that has been one thing that I have thought about, but it didn't hit me until it was the beginning of classes and we're writing all the press releases of what's happening and we're in the central office. There's no students there. There's no faculty, right? So I need to find a way to keep that energy, that mojo that comes from being in a campus, that it follows into the central office.
I think you'll have no trouble. You've been wonderful for me to work with, and I always appreciated that opportunity, and I wish you all the best as Chancellor.
It's mutual.
So thank you so much for joining us, Chancellor Félix Matos Rodríguez, Chancellor of the City University of New York.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of EdCast. Join us next time for more conversations about education.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to cunyedcast@gmail.com.